Hello everyone, welcome to Ian and Friends Giro d'Italia edition. I am FloBikes Senior Editor Ian Dille.
And I am Michael Sheehan, Ian's friend. Today we saw the final battle of the Giro d'Italia. What a ride it's been.
I am so sad.
Are
the
you?
Giro is over. We're drowning our sorrows.
Literally don't know what we're going to do with ourselves anymore.
But it is a celebration.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful stage in Rome, around the Colosseum. Just like we got a helicopter tour of Jerusalem to start off the Giro, we got this beautiful helicopter tour of Rome for 2 hours to end the Giro, and it was great. Not without controversy, though.
No, it started off muy tranquilo. Racers were not particularly interested in racing.
We're bringing the show a little bit late to you today because they started off so slow. Because the course, we kind of called this yesterday, hoping for some fireworks because the course was kind of crazy. There was cobbles, there was tight turns, and they just decided they weren't going to race it. The GC riders did, at least.
Yeah, so we saw this weird thing where you had a really, really cool final stage of the Grand Tour. Potential for fireworks, absolutely, even before the sprint, just the nature of the roads, the technical features of the course. But there's this precedent that's been set mainly at the Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées, where it is strictly a procession. GC riders get their final day the day before, be it mountains, a time trial, something like that. The last day is for celebrating, riding slow, you made it, congratulations, slow roll to the sprint. The start of today, nobody really knew what was going to happen. All the GC riders were not happy about the course. They thought it was just dangerous. We saw a lot of talking between the heads of state on the teams and the commissaires until finally it seemed like they came to some on-the-road agreement that GC would be neutralized after 3 laps and then they could race.
Yeah, and this created a weird dynamic where the GC leaders were like, I guess at the end, 8 minutes or so behind the guys that were actually racing this stage for the win. But at the end of the day, you know, it was kind of a bummer for the fans, but we've been treated to a lot of dramatics for 3 weeks. I mean, the risks these guys have taken for 3 weeks, some of the descents they've done in the rain, you know, risking falling off the side of mountains, everything else. I think they were sort of over it by the time they got to Rome. They're like, we're not finishing our Giro with a sketchy criterium.
Yeah, they absolutely were looking forward to essentially a day off, finishing with the sprint today. You know, like we've been talking on and on about just how hard this Giro d'Italia was. This was, you know, one of the hardest Grand Tours in recent years. We're hearing from the racers. It was just on every day. There was really never any sleeper stages throughout the entire 3 weeks. So these riders have been looking at Rome, seeing it as a Champs-Élysées affair, and just really, like, you know, you're building yourself up for 3 weeks to have just a chill end to the Giro, and they were not going to take the risks on the roads.
And kudos to the Giro organizers for saying, okay, not putting up too much of a fight. I mean, the Giro organization has done a really good job. I mean, let's not forget this race started in Israel and they pulled it off. And now, you know, we're finishing in Rome is this beautiful spectacle. And, you know, from everything from like on Monte Zoccolan where they had, you know, they couldn't get cars on the road. So they had the mechanics holding bicycles for the leaders on the tops of, you know, on the backs of motorcycles. Like they definitely crossed every T and dotted every I. And yeah, sure, maybe they whiffed on the course they gave the racers for this final day, but good on them for just being like, hey, you know, if we have to neutralize it, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, and so we saw a sleepy start, but that is not to say that we did not see an exciting race, because once it got on, the GC riders, they bowed out. Honestly, Tom Dumoulin, he doesn't want to win the Giro if Chris Froome has a crash on cobbles or something. That's not how any racer really wants to have a huge result. So GC riders, they shook hands, they raced their best race, got out of the way. Sprint teams, pro Conti teams, they put on a show for the closing laps.
Yeah, and we got to see Tony Martin try to go in the breakaway again.
It was a close one too. Tony Martin, we've been talking about him all tour because he has just been trying day in and day out. He's one of these really, really strong riders, but he's just so specialized. He is a time trial specialist. He is not going to be anywhere in a field sprint. He's not going to win a mountaintop finish with the best climbers. He has to go for a breakaway and try to just outpower people. And that's what we've seen him do every day. And did not disappoint.
Yeah, no shortage of animating the race. He didn't walk away with a huge result from this Giro, but he was there every day lighting up the race in a very hard race. Coming into the finish, one of my favorite moments was Barre Merida, Matej Mohoric bringing Bonifacio all the way to the pointy end of the race with like 500 meters to go.
What a pull that was. That would be, if Velon releases some power data from how hard Matej Mohoric went to overtake the quick step train and drop him off like 2 wheels ahead of Elliot Viviani.
He went all the way around the front. Like he dropped him off on the left side and then came off on the right side.
He crossed the quick step train going flat out.
And then poor Bonifacio tries to take, he doesn't know what to do at that point. He's left in the wind. He tries to take Viviani's wheel. They get pretty argy-bargy. Again, these guys going like 35 plus miles per hour, leaning on each other. He drops back, tries to knock Sam Bennett off of Viviani's wheel. No thanks. And then
I've got to say, when he went to Sam Bennett did it so classy because he didn't lean into Bonifacio. He just went around, put his handlebars in front of him, and just moved him politely off his wheel.
Yeah, and then we were treated to the true drag race we've been waiting for between Viviani and Bennett. And Bennett, I mean, it was not until the last 20 meters that he got him, and we could see Viviani's bike just rattling all around. It was on these sort of smooth cobbles that they finished, and Viviani just couldn't get traction.
You know, that maybe that's part of it, but this is what I've been seeing from Bennett for the last couple stages. Viviani won the last 2 sprints, but Bennett has been just too far back going into them. This was the first time he was locked on Viviani's wheel, had the perfect positioning going into the sprint, and we have seen such a ferocious late charge to the line from Sam Bennett. And I've been really, really wanting to see what he could do in a clean run against Viviani without having to pass 5 people before he got up to the Italian. He is just so quick. He has that just 10, 5-second burst of power, and what a win.
Locking on to Viviani's wheel is no small ask. Like Viviani, I mean, this was one of the more straightforward run-ins to the line, but Viviani isn't necessarily, he's not your sort of classic traditional sprinter where he just locks onto the back of his lead-out train. Quickstep uses a lot of interesting tactics, coming late, using a sweeper, and so getting Viviani's wheel isn't the easiest thing in the world, obviously. But my take is that Viviani chose the wrong bike. I mean, it was because they're both Specialized sponsors teams, and Viviani was on the Venge, which is a much stiffer bike, and Bennett was on the tarmac and definitely wasn't bouncing around as much.
And there's some interesting disc brake versus rim brake conversation that we could have. Viviani was on a disc brake Venge, Bennett was on the rim brake tarmac.
Yeah, so
was this a true test of the bike? Ian blames the bike.
It's always about the bike at the end of the day. But yeah, anyways, just a little mechanical interlude there. But yeah, go watch the stage if you haven't seen it yet. Fantastic finale to the Giro, and what a Giro it was. We don't have a stage to talk about tomorrow, but let's give our final thoughts. I mean, this race delivered for 3 weeks. I mean, the Giro has a reputation for coming down to the 3rd week of the race, delivering unexpected finishes, and this one, it's going to go down in history.
This was an absolutely historical Grand Tour that we saw from start to finish. Like Ian said, we started in Israel. This has never been done before, taking a Grand Tour out of Europe for the start. And there were so many question marks going into the race, you know, so many logistics, security issues, travel. It went so well. we went into the mainland Italy and just got day after day of drama, spectacle, exactly quintessential Giro d'Italia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Nate Brown, for how bad you had to suffer during this Giro, but it was for our benefit. I mean, it was quite the spectacle that we got to witness, and
we just saw so many of these opportunistic riders. You know, we use Nate Brown as an example because, you know, he's a friend and we just are always keyed in on his social media, but we're seeing like really only the principal riders on every team being able to make any impact in this race. You know, there were almost no breakaways, just teams riding flat out for their leader throughout every single stage. No easy days, no days where you just get a sleeper, let the breakaway go until the last day of the race, really.
Yeah, and say what you will about Chris Froome. I mean, we'll get into his doping case and, you know, sort of the specter of his alleged salbutamol use in a different episode, but we're sort of seeing a golden era of Grand Tour riding with he is a phenomenal racer, but there are people that can challenge him. He's not just squashing everyone. I mean, he was certainly on the ropes during this Giro, and, you know, are him and Tom going to have a rematch at the Tour? I mean, it's exciting to see so many challengers, you know, at the front of these races, and not to mention Yates. I mean, how is he going to come back from this? Chavez. I mean, there's Pino. I mean, there are so many guys that were in this race with a chance to win it.
Yeah, we have seen just people go from the top of the world to out the back in a matter of 24 hours throughout this day. There's been no dominant head and heels above everyone else rider, and it is put on a show. We're going to pick out some of our personal favorite moments that you can go back and watch in our video archives. For me personally, I've got to say Stage 6 Mount Etna, that was such good bike racing. When we saw Chavez in the break, he infiltrated a break that he should not have been in. Team should have shut that down the second they saw a rider that strong get up it. And sure enough, up Mount Etna, he was the lone survivor. He was making a solo charge to the line in the final kilometers, and that's when his teammate Yates sprung free of the pack after racing a really cagey strategic race. You know, he had a teammate up the road all day. He never had to put any time in on the front, and just when everyone else around him started to tire, he just shot up to Chavez. They went 1-2, and from that moment on, it looked like Mitchelton Scott was going to be a force to be reckoned with this Giro.
Yeah, and I mean, that really started the storyline of this whole Giro. That was, you know, besides the opening time trial, that was really the first big GC day, and the imagery of that race. You know, it's racing through this volcanic terrain and barren landscape. For me, and, you know, this is no surprise probably to anyone that watched the Giro, the Finestre. I mean, I've never seen anything like that in a Grand Tour, where the first climb, you know, really the first major climb of the day, the biggest mountain of the whole race, just fireworks, gravel roads, you know, Chris Froome attacking from 80K out. It was insane. I mean, it was so wild, and then also just the imagery of that mountain. You know, it looked like you were at the top of the world when those guys were going over the summit of that. The descent down the backside, and then it just sent up for like 2 hours of glued to your TV, like what's gonna happen. So, yeah, I mean, though there's a lot of, you know, controversy around that stage, and sort of like Chris Froome stealing the jersey, taking the jersey off the back of Tom Dumoulin, seeing them chase each other for 50 miles was, yeah, just ridiculous.
That Finestre stage is going to go down in the history books. People are going to be talking about that seriously decades to come. That was a just pretty magical day of bike racing, whatever your opinions of Chris Froome are aside. That was incredible bike racing like I have not seen in a long time.
Yeah. So, as sad as we are to see the Giro end, we do have more bike races coming up on FloBikes. We have the Tour de Suisse in about 2 weeks. Peter Sagan, it's going to set up the storyline for the whole Tour de France. We're going to have the whole Movistar team there, Mikel Landa, Quintana, Valverde, Richie Porte, TJ Van Garderen. It's going to be a heck of a show, and we will be back daily for the Tour de Suisse.
We definitely will. Thank you so much for joining throughout the entire Giro d'Italia. One last thing to slip in. I have to raise the glass to Adam Hansen.
Yes.
20 consecutive Grand Tours. That is an accomplishment.
Cheers.
Cheers to Adam Hansen. Cheers to all the guys who survived that Giro. Thanks for joining.
We'll see you later.